Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News.
Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. In keeping our Survivor News post game of Survivor 45, we are excited to welcome a gem, a legend to the podcast. You may know her from the original Bello tribe. You actually might know her from the nurses station, but we affectionately know her as Queen Kellie. Kellie, welcome to the Purple Pants podcast. How are you?
Oh my God, the ding. Yes. Thank you for having me, Bryce and Jack. I have loved listening to you two all season. So I am greatly honored to be here.
We love it. I feel like I got so excited that you were here. I forgot baby boy Jackery was here. Of course, you know Jack from The Circle. Okay, season 2. Emily, you might actually know him from Survivor News or The Floor is Lava. Jack, how you feeling? We loving the haircut.
Thank you. I'm feeling great. I've been so sad that the season's wrapped up. We haven't done any coverage, but now we're back with the Kellie interview. One of my favorite players from the season was singing your praises all season on the podcast, so I'm really excited to dive in and actually get to discuss all your gameplay and just all the non-gameplay things in the season.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you guys. I feel like really, especially Jack, you too, Bryce, but really especially Jack, really got what I was trying to do. And so it was really nice to hear a podcast understanding what I was trying to do to win the game. Didn't quite work out, but
we know that in Survivor there are levels to this, right, Kellie? And so in the Survivor fandom, how would you categorize yourself before this season? Like super fan, casual fan, what is Survivor? Where you at on that spectrum?
Well, I never watched Survivor until the pandemic. That's the first time I ever discovered it. So I don't think I can ever claim like I'm a huge super fan just for that reason. But when I like something, I'm like all in. I like watched one season and then I'm like reading the Wikipedia, like I'm in the meta. Like I like to dig in and feel out everything. So I started watching. One of my friends put on Heroes Villains and was like, "Oh, you probably like this, Kellie." And then obviously I was obsessed with Heroes Villains. So not the best season to start with, but then I just kind of went on like this like tear through like I Googled like best Survivor seasons and just like went through that. And that started the obsession. And then once I applied, and I applied really late, I was the alternate for 43. I had all this time to kind of really dive in more on like a level of like I knew I was maybe or probably going to play. And I think that changed how I watched Survivor, like a little bit from like not a fan, but more towards like prep. But I think I knew my Survivor knowledge was pretty good by that time. And I had a lot of recency. Like I had watched all the seasons in the last 2 years. So I think good and bad from that, but I think I fall somewhere kind of in the middle of I'm not a noob for sure. I watched like at least 30 something seasons, but I'm not, I can't name every second boot like Brandon. So that I'll never be that.
I wanted to jump in and ask, because you mentioned you were an alternate on 43, and I know I think you applied, like you said, during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
How did being out there as an alternate on 43, going home, and then redoing the process, getting on 45, how did that alter how you prepared, how you played? What was that experience like?
For sure. I mean, I really thought like going into it that it would be like a huge advantage. And I think in some ways it really is. But in some ways it's also sort of a disadvantage because I had so much time in between that, like, I think the pressure and the stakes I put on myself, like, just got higher and higher, which they already are high when you're going out to play Survivor. But it was very interesting for me to go out there, like be in the pregame experience, like see what that's like, meet everybody, and then watch the season play out as I was waiting to go back on. Like I got to see the entirety of 43. It was an interesting experience because, like, I mean, I think a lot of us were surprised. Like from day one, would you have picked Gabler to win the season? Like probably not. So seeing him at Ponderosa and then seeing how things went, I was like, whoa. Like I do think it was a little bit of a humbling experience for me. And I went into the game, I tried to like really like not underestimate people who don't seem like a big threat. And I think it also altered, and I pitched this stuff to people in the game sometimes where I'm like, a lot of like non-traditional, like threatening players win Survivor now. So I'm like, are these people actually the new threats? You know what I mean? Like you have like Marianne and like Gabler, like they're not like like Austin with like the big muscles or someone like that. So that sort of played a lot into how I viewed the game. And I just wanted to be a little bit more open to working with anyone I needed to. And that maybe I was underestimating somebody like a Gabler who seems a little kookier or whatever and what they were actually capable of in the game. So I think that definitely changed how I viewed some stuff, but I had so much time to prep. Like I did so much stuff.
And keeping that same train of thought, was there anyone that you kind of felt like just from strict appearance, like soon as you got on the island, like I need to keep an eye out for this person because they are maybe unassuming and not that,
Mm.
prevalent in the eyes of like, not like I don't want to say not a strong player, but like, somebody that like you would underestimate. Was there anyone that like came to your mind right off the bat that you're like, red flag, I need to watch out for this person?
Let me think. I don't think there's anyone as sort of like poignant as somebody like Gabler on ours in our situation. But I think a lot of people maybe like underestimate Kendra a little bit. I think she's very competitive. In some of my early conversations with her, like she was clearly there to play the game. And I think maybe that played a little bit into there, like because she and I are so different, but we got along very well. And we actually did have like we had so many strategic conversations and I felt like we could have a little bit of a back and forth. So I think maybe that's an example, but I don't think I have as clear of someone like we don't really have like a Gabler or like, you know what I mean, in our season. So it was different, but I think it just made me really open to working with anyone and everybody, which was like sort of my problem, but also something I was good at. So, you're always trying to walk that line there.
And especially like in preseason, right? So you were there for 43 and you did
Mhm.
pre-filming on 45. I remember on Cagayan when we rolled in our intro scene, we rolled into the boat. We were like sitting on the boat for hours. And then when we finally rolled in and we're on that mat and we see Jeff, and I think the viewers at home, they don't really realize that, like, sometimes I forget, right? I feel like it's just the castaways and Jeff out there, but it is a whole production team. And I remember that made
Mhm.
so intimidated. What was it like for you when you got out there and you actually saw like, oh, this is a production?
Yeah. You totally like describing exactly well. Like when you first get up there, I mean, we were on the boat too. So it was like so many cameras and people. I was not prepared for like the sheer volume of like what it is to be in like a big production set. So it was very intimidating, super nerve-wracking. Like I barely remember what I even said on the mat to Jeff. But yeah, that is a crazy moment. But it's also one of those like when we're like pulling up on the boats and you could see the logo for the first time, like it almost makes me like emotional, like thinking about it. Cause it is like, I had so much time building up to like literally this moment to like actually get there was really special and really, really cool. It's like, wow, this is like this huge friggin' thing. Like this is real. Like
Yeah.
crazy.
Jack, what was it like for you when you pulled up on the boat?
So, it was nice. The wind was flowing. Me and Jeff just kind of hung out for a while. And he said he's going to get me on. No, reminds me of pull up to my circle apartment. There was nobody. But yeah, I wanted to ask Kellie, you mentioned a little bit earlier, now we're sort of in the early stage of the game. I want to talk a little bit about original Bello because you
Yeah.
guys obviously didn't have to vote anybody out, but of course there was a lot of dynamics at play. We saw you sort of positioned as a swing vote with Brando. Walk me through, what was sort of the strategy there? Like who might have gone home if you went to a tribal? Were there any fun moments that we didn't see just at camp? Like what happened at early Bello that we did not get to see?
Yeah, I mean, early Bello was like I have said that I felt like I played more Survivor almost in those first like 5 or 6 days than I even did because it was just like constant talk, like constant like round robins for me. And like I just felt like I was like Caleb always says I was spinning plates. Like I had so many people around me that I was like trying to keep everything together, but also not let everyone kind of like corroborate their stories so I could like stay in a good spot. But I mean, I think I've said this before, but like the overall dynamic early on was very much like me, Kendra, and Katora linked up very early. It was like a very natural group. We obviously had so many like little like silly things and kind of like, oh, our birthdays are in September. But I definitely think sort of like the influence of 44 and a lot of women going home early played into that. Like, at least I felt that way. For me, going out there and being on this tribe, like I didn't anticipate being the smallest person or woman on the tribe. And so then I was like by far the littlest. So I was like really concerned about just sort of like being targeted for some reason like that. So I felt really safe with the women. And I really like liked that alliance. And then from there, the way the plan went was like, well, we really need a fourth person. And so me, Katora, and Kendra had a conversation about like, okay, we're going to basically suss our options out and pick what we're going to want to do. So I talked to Bruce, Kendra talked to Jake, and Katura made that first conversation with Brando. So we all had these talks. And, when I talked to Bruce, this was when I kind of like, Bruce was like, I really like you and I want to work with you. And it was very early. Bruce was like all in with me, which was great. But I was like, oh man, like now I already sort of had this like middle vibe going on kind of early, because he was like, oh, who do you like? And I feel like me and Kendra were hanging out a lot. So I was like, oh yeah, I like Kendra. And he's like, I want to work with Jake. I was like, okay, noted. You do not want to work with Kendra. So then Kendra had a good conversation with Jake, but he was like holding his cards a little close to his chest because he heard us saying his name. And then Brando was really, really open with Katora and like really wanted to work with us and said that he was feeling a little nervous. So eventually the three of us came back together. We had a talk and we were like, okay, like we feel best about Brando. And that was where you had a conversation with me and Brando and Kendra. And it sort of like went from there. So that was the first like core alliance that formed. And then pretty soon after that, Bruce and Jake approached me and Brando separately. And so that was sort of the order which things went. And we were like, oh, damn. Okay, we're in the middle. This is a good spot for us. Let's sort of like take this and run with it. And so that was how like it kind of all started.
Yeah. We love that. Well, first of all, we stand a Brando. Okay. I don't think Brando gets enough.
We were robbed of Brando. Brando is so funny. Like, you guys missed out. He's like always like ripping puns. He's so sarcastic. Like, I love that kid. I think he really did. He was also good at being like kind of the glue in a group that didn't always get along. So losing him, I actually think was like them, Austin and Drew taking out Brando, I think was like an absolutely brilliant move on their part and really set them up to do well. But I think, Jackie, I mean, you asked like who would have gone like that first week. Jake was kind of in the hot seat just because he had one of the things he like thrown the key on the barge and like it said, don't call it a comeback. And we were like a little annoyed about that. And he just didn't talk to us right at the start, the girls. So we were just kind of wary. And it's because he heard us talking about him. So it makes a lot of sense. So that first week, it might've been Jake. But after that, I do think it would have been Bruce, because me and Brando just felt safer with the women. We had more talks with each other. Like we had hung out more. I think we connected on a personal level a little bit better, as well as I felt like if we went more than once, for me at least, I was like, if we go twice and say we take Bruce out, I felt like they would be less likely to turn on me and they would actually be even more likely to vote out Brando than me, worst case scenario. So that was what pushed me to work with the women. Like actually, the scene I was in episode 2, I think, where the boys are out on the raft and me, Kendra, and Katora back at camp having a conversation. The beginning of that conversation, Katora actually says she wants to vote out Brando, as she was feeling distrustful of him. And so I was like freaking out at that, because at this point I was like all in on Brando. And that made me gave me a little bit of squirrely vibes, but it also made me feel like, okay, worst case scenario, the girls are more distrustful of Brando than me. So it kind of behooves me to stay with them. And I was just worried about Bruce being a little, like if he stayed in the game, say we took out Jake or Brando and he didn't know, like him still in there, he would be pretty pissed. I was like, it'll be harder to work with Bruce than like, say we don't tell Jake that we're going to vote Bruce out. I think that there's movement forward with Jake in a way that might be a little bit more difficult with Bruce. So that was the way that I kind of like saw the early Bello dynamics going.
And so interesting enough, you bring up Uncle Bruce, right? And we see post-merge where he proclaims, maybe not even to you at first, but to everyone else, that you are his number one. Like he working with Kellie. I don't know what you say, Kellie, my number one. How do you feel like that impacted your game?
Yeah, I mean, that was not after the merge. He was been telling me that since like day 2. which was great. For me, like I was definitely like walking this tightrope with everybody. But by the time we hit the merge and everyone's still there, I was like, I can't like target Bruce immediately because he was just so like all in with me. But I do think there is this friction with him and Katora was a big problem for me trying to hold this group together. Now, obviously, I wish Bruce did not proclaim to everybody that we were so close. Like that's definitely not. He really did this with Julie because he really wanted to work with Julie, and so he was like kind of trying to, I think, build this group that he wanted, which was me and Julie and Jake and him. Unfortunately, Julie obviously saw that she's like going to be on the bottom of that group, so she's not really like, let me go work with them. It doesn't really make sense, but yeah, I don't think it helped me. Being attached to Bruce was sort of like this like blessing and a curse that I had going on the whole game. And I gave that confessional where I'm like, when he goes is the most important choice for me. And I think if I had made it farther in the game, that would have absolutely been true. And the reason I eventually started to be like, all right, I gotta get Bruce out was because of instances like that. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like I couldn't control is sort of the wrong word, but I couldn't really control exactly how he was going to vote. Like, for example, he really came for Caleb at the Mergatory. And I really think that was super bad for like Bello's long-term game because it just put us on the back heel like so quickly. And he had been the one who was so into working with Caleb when we got to New Lulu. So it was like just a back and forth kind of thing that made it hard for me to sort of like see a clear path, like very long-term with him. So but I love Bruce, and like everyone plays their game their own way. And I think a big part of Survivor is understanding how other people are going to play and either using that to your advantage or letting it take you down. So, I mean, that's the game, baby.
Yeah. And then flashing back to the swap Lulu tribe that you were on. Obviously, never went to a tribal. You guys were kind of a powerhouse tribe.
Mm-hmm.
But can you talk about the dynamics there a little bit? Kind of the same thing with early Bello, like who might have gone home. Who were you working with? Like, were there anything fun that we didn't see?
Yeah. That was I just like kind of couldn't believe how that swap went. Like, obviously I'm happy that I was like on the right side of the numbers, but I was like, man, I still got Bruce and Katora here to yell at each other all the time. But I was pretty excited about it. I mean, Caleb kind of got a big reputation at early Ponderosa for doing all his dances and being so gregarious, but like that didn't really bother me. I really liked Caleb, and immediately when we got on the beach, like I am talking within seconds, Bruce was like, I want to get out Katora and work with Caleb. And then the reverse happened. Katora is like, I want to work with Caleb and get out Bruce. I was like, oh, here we go again. Same situation. So I kind of actually sat back a lot in that early time frame because I've always been like a little bit more on like authenticity and like genuineness when I'm trying to build relationships in the show. And I had that luxury because I didn't go to tribal council. Absolutely. Because I could play a little slower. I could have a little bit of a longer term buildup. So I felt like the relationship would be more genuine for me. So I was like, I'm going to let them go hot and heavy on Caleb, like pitching, whatever. And then I kind of sat back and watched what was going on, right? Like Katura, like cross-examining Caleb, and Bruce in front of each other about the journey. Like that gave me a little bit of like heebie-jeebies and nervous. And I'd rather like sit back and kind of like see what was going on. Like what were people throwing out there before I made my move. And after the first immunity challenge, Caleb, you guys saw a little bit of this talk, but he approached me and was like, hey, I think I figured everything out. You're in the middle. Like Bruce and Jake are on one side and Katura and like Kendra were on the other, and you were in the middle. And I was like, yeah, man, you're 100% on the head there. Like you got it. And he told me everything about Lulu. He told me in great detail about Sabaya's idol. I was like very shocked. Like he told me all about the burning and the everything. And so he gave me a lot of information, and he basically pitched me the same thing Brando pitched me, which is like, here we are, we're in the middle and we can control the votes if we go to tribal council. And I was like, I am all about that. And Caleb was almost even more attractive as this ally for me than even Brando, because I was looking for someone who like would be a shield for me. And I mean, he's Caleb, like he's this like lovable, physical, like he's kind of like a triple threat kind of player. So I was like, if people ever realize he is more like he's more threatening than me. You know what I mean? So I love the idea of playing with threats. Like I was super into that going into the game. I pitched Austin that on the journey. And so I was like, I think me and Caleb's relationship was like a little bit downplayed, obviously, because we didn't go to tribal council. So it's the same situation. Him and I were discussing what we wanted to do. And by the time that we were in that position, we had another conversation with Katora. Like I had separate conversations with Katora. Caleb had separate conversations with Katora. And even though there was some instances where, you know, I got a little bit worried about Katora, like where she was cross-examining Caleb, or she did a lot of idol hunting at Bello, and then she also did it at Lulu, and that was kind of obvious. That made me nervous. I was never wanting to vote her out. Like I always wanted to keep her because I felt like she was sort of on my side, and I knew that she would always be kind of going against Bruce, which made it really easy for me to understand where she wanted to go. And so we had this big talk before the immunity challenges, me, Caleb, and Katora, and Katora walked away, and I looked at Caleb and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to vote out Bruce, especially right before the merge. I felt like, you know, this is a fine time to lose Bruce. Like I didn't need him as much anymore. And he's a big dude. He's a big threat. He could win challenges. So removing him isn't like so detrimental to my game. And then I thought it would really obviously build trust with Katora and Caleb. And we were even considering telling Jake about that kind of last minute. So I think it actually would have maybe brought us together a little more if that had happened. I'm definitely, one of my takeaways from my experience is, at least for me, being in a decent spot, it is very it's not a good thing to not go to tribal council ever. Like you got to go once. Like you need something that's going to show this is where my trust is. And if you don't have that, the only other thing you can do that with is like if you find an advantage early or something like that. And I didn't have that early on. And by the time I got the amulet and stuff, I wanted to be a little bit more secretive. I do wish I told more people about that, but what are you going to do?
Did you feel like almost being in the middle of Bello? Like, do you feel like that at any point they can maybe target you, right? Like come together and like name you if you kind of played this middle and not really make a decision? Was that something that worried you or like was spinning in your brain?
Of course, definitely. I mean, I was very stressed most of the game because of most of that early game because of that. But how I approached it was I was way more upfront with the girls and Brando than I was with Bruce. And because Bruce didn't get along with Kendra and Katora, it allowed me to like essentially lie to him about what I was talking to them about, and they didn't cross-examine each other. Like they didn't corroborate stories. So in the beginning, I was very nervous about this because there was an instance where Katora tried to make an alliance with Bruce, like early on in Bello, and Bruce came and told me about it. So I was a little worried that maybe they would talk and like realize that I was like kind of in with both of them, but it never happened because they really didn't see eye to eye. That allowed me to kind of skirt my way through. But I gave all these confessionals. I was like, I'm ready to draw a line in the sand. Like I'm gonna piss people off. Like I knew that this was the position I was in and someone was gonna be mad at me. But I feel like when you win Survivor, you do well, like you can't do that with having zero enemies at all. And sometimes having a public enemy is actually really helpful to your game. So I wasn't like too concerned with what the fallout would be, because I was like, if I get Bruce out, all I really got to deal with is Jake, who kind of, you know, I think is a lot more of a flexible player and actually sees the game in a similar way that I do, which is like, even if you're not best friends with somebody, or maybe they've burned you in the past, sometimes you got to work with them on a vote to get something done. I think Jake, you know, he didn't have a lot of agency because the way things went, but he did understand Survivor in the same way that I do. So I felt like there was still, it would have been okay possibly to move forward with Jake in some capacity, or it would have been harder with Bruce.
Right. We see huge in Survivor, the diversity, right? The 2020 diversity initiative. And so we see now in these new seasons of Survivor, there's so much representation. And I think even on the LGBTQ plus front, right? Like the queers that are coming out, like it's like the amount of, it's amazing, right? Like, and me, you know, being an old school, even though I'm younger than both y'all, but like, you know, just seeing the progression of Survivor truly like brings me to tears at times. And knowing that you're going out there to play, like, how did that feel, you representing the LGBTQ plus community? How did that influence how you played? Like, what was your thought process going into the game?
Yeah, I mean, a part of my casting journey and just getting there, like that was a huge thing for me. Obviously, I think Survivor's done such a good job recently, like bringing in more members of the LGBTQ plus community onto the show. But I still felt like I hadn't really seen someone like myself on the show. And then to get there, and I was so surprised, like they put me and Couture on the same tribe together, like two queer women. Like that was so cool the moment that we realized that. Like honestly, I really do wish that stuff like that got highlighted more. That my sexuality was not really talked about on the show, but I talked about it a lot in pregame press. Like that did mean a lot to me to represent this community well and like show people what we were capable of. My pregame stuff, I was like, I want to be the first lesbian to win Survivor. Obviously, Erica has beat me to it, which I'm thrilled about. All of our like new queer winners, Parvati and Erica, so amazing. But yeah, that definitely like it felt like an honor. And anything like I want to represent nurses well, I want to represent queer women well. Like maybe that's putting too much pressure on myself, but like that was a part of like why I wanted to play well and what motivated me to like play really hard and like play to win. Because I wanted to show people that like the things I learned from being a nurse, the experiences I went through as a queer woman, like actually empowered me to play the game better and be better at integrating myself with people and things like that. So I'm like super proud of that. There's like 3 queer women on this season. It's 3 like really strong, awesome, cool players, like big characters. It's really, really an honor. So we love it. We love it. Keep it up,
Yes.
Survivor.
Yes, more.
Absolutely. Shifting from that.
Hard transition for Jack.
Yeah. Bryce and I compared our question notes like a little bit, but not in full.
I like it. I love it. We got we got a little bit of both.
Right.
That's why you guys are the dream team. You're like the 1-2 punch, you know?
Right. But now I'm so interested to see what Jack's transition is going to
So,
be.
now tell me a little bit about the journey that you took with Austin and Jeremiah and the sandwich and the amulet. Walk me through that decision-making process a little bit about why, as sort of the middle position in the decision between sandwich and amulet, what was kind of going through your mind, and why did it ultimately end up being sandwich? And I'm sorry if I'm lagging a little bit because I can tell that I am, but
You are a little, but it doesn't matter because the journey transition is so flawless. It totally removed any issues with the internet. Yes, I know this is a highly controversial part of my game, so let's talk about it. I like desperately did not want to go on a journey. Like I never volunteered. Like that one time, like Victoria and Bruce did like I think it was rock, paper, scissors. Like I was like, I'm out. I don't want to do it. I wanted nothing to do with it. I always wanted to know where advantages were, but not necessarily have it myself. If there was a risk of losing votes and things like that, that kind of like made me not as into the whole journey vibe. But obviously I got picked to go on the journey, which Dia told me was a strategic move on her part because, she and I ended up really liking each other and it didn't work out. But like, we definitely, I think we're kind of like making eyes at like, oh, maybe we'll work together from afar. So that's I think why she sent me. And then me being like upset I sat out of the challenge was like a convenient excuse. But getting there, obviously I was like a little nervous that it was 2 Rebas, but we have this whole walk up to the mountain, which like takes a long time and was honestly exhausting, like low key kind of mean to make us do that. And I like scraped my knee. I was like,
no.
But it made my lie so believable. I was like, whatever. So once we got to the top, we were able to talk and we talked the whole journey up. I feel like it was pretty clear that Jay and Austin were not working together. Or like they weren't like that close because we got there and they wanted like completely different things. And it didn't seem like their communication was great. And so for me, I obviously ended up in the middle of the decision again, which was like not what I wanted. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like it was like so stressful because I'm like, I'm not going to be the one to like make this call because then everyone's going to blame me. And we have like all these, it's again, like all these cameras and producers staring at us, like make this decision. It's very stressful. But Jay was sharing with us about the last vote, where Sean left, but like Sifu got a vote and it was so crazy. And now Sifu's mad at Jay and Dee's here and Dee got a vote and everyone's upset. So I was like, all right, like maybe Reba is also like Bello. Like we haven't gone to tribal and there's been all this pent up stuff and maybe they don't actually have this like cohesive group that maybe is presented by like the ability to win challenges, which is very similar to my experience on Bello. And I think in general in Survivor, that happens all the time. And so that was sort of in my head. And then when talking to Austin, I pitched him this whole thing where I was basically like, I know I'm being called a threat. He told me that Kendra had shared with him that people thought I was a social threat. So I was like, all right, like I want to work with other threats. Like he was scared this was going to put us in a bad zone. And I was like, I don't want to take you out. Like I have no reason to. I want to play with other threatening players to sort of, move through the game with, as like we need to like kind of like shield each other. Like I totally believe in that. It's like the lions hyena strategy that Tony talks about in Winners at War. That was sort of where I was at with that. But at the end of the day, the real reason I made the decision is because I thought that Austin would get targeted early in the merge without me even having to say anything, just based on like who he is and the traditional kind of like Survivor lore. Like if you look at people who went out in my spot, it's like all big dudes, you know what I mean? And like Brandon Cottam and like James Jones went out around there. Like a lot of like bigger men like go around the early merge. Like, and he's like this guy with like big muscles and so intimidating. And so
What else? Hold on, wait. He had what? Tell me more about Austin real quick. Big muscles. What what else?
Wriggling muscles, salivating over the sandwich. So I really just thought like Austin would go and I wouldn't have to do the dirty work necessarily. And then I just would be left with Jay, who to me seemed like she really wanted allies. And so I was like, I could either work with Jay, or I felt that I would have the agency to, if I needed to get rid of her, I could have done that too. No, I knew it was a risk, and it was definitely, looking back on it, I'm not sure I would make the same decision with the knowledge I have now. But I didn't know that like Austin had this great alliance, that Austin had another idol, that he was like so insulated. The way the rock draws went at the merge, I never got a chance to target Austin because he was safe and then he was on the other tribe. So a lot of things shook out in a wrong way for me, but it was definitely a risky move. I think it was partially motivated by the fact that I hadn't been able to go to tribal. And then he was telling me that Kendra had called me a social threat at New Bello. So I was like, oh shit, like, sorry. Oh shoot. Like I really need some power to help me move through this game, because now I'm a little bit exposed. Like my game is a little bit out there where people see that I have a lot of connections. So that was my motivation for the amulet.
That darn amulet. I tell you, your season had a number of castaways that dropped out, left, decided to leave, and it sent the Survivor fandom haywire, right? Where Jack and I, to this day, will argue kind of about this point. But what was your take on people leaving or quitting the game of Survivor?
I mean, like I obviously would never quit. Like I'm so competitive and I was so happy to be there. But I think honestly, there's a lot of great seasons of Survivor where someone quits. It's sort of part of the game. And I think it's like, I was like, our season is giving like messiness, strategy, drama, like kind of had everything. So I didn't like see it as like such a horrible thing for our season overall. But it is something that's played in my head. I'm like, well, what if Sean didn't leave the game? Like, how does that change the dynamic of if there's more Lulus at the merge, or if there's so kind of going down those rabbit holes, I think is really dangerous for any player's mental health, but is hard to not do. So like, I think there's some frustration like in that aspect, but if people, especially like Hannah, I think she like did it in like a very respectful way and did it because there are people who wanted to be there really badly, and she wasn't feeling that same way. She did it early. She gifted us Emily Flippin. So, everything happens for a reason.
Right.
It is what it is. And, I'm not in their shoes, so I don't ever want to like say this is exactly what I would have done. So that's where I'm at with that. But I think our season is sort of fun in that we got a lot of, not everyone's like the best player ever, but we still have some great strategy. And like, I think that's what reality TV is a little bit about. A little bit of mess, a little drama. So I
completely agree, right? Like I feel like people quitting, although I know the Survivor fandom hates it, right? Like I feel like it's a part of, I always tell people Survivor is a game of like strategy, and it's a game of numbers, and it's also a game of luck, right? Like there are certain situations you kind of just happen to find yourself in, and sometimes it benefits you. And so I really feel like people stepping down from the game is a part of that luck. I know other people don't agree. And so we can.
I mean, I hear people's frustrations on that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna try to downplay that. Of course, if I have been playing for the show for a lot of years, or even like in the game, I was like so shocked. Like, it's definitely frustrating, and everyone's entitled to like feel that way, especially if they've been in casting and feel that way. I think that I totally get that. But that being said, what you're getting to, I think Survivor is a lot of luck. I always say it's sort of like 80% luck and then 20% like what you do when you're in that position. I actually asked a question at Final Tribal that didn't make it into the show that was about that. And I loved Dee's answer to this question, because I think she really owned, here's the places I got lucky, but here's the places where I didn't. Like, there were some instances where, like, she wasn't on the right side of the mergatory thing or whatever, like where she had to overcome bad luck. But she's also like, you know what? I was on the Reba tribe. Like, that was great luck. That is how things went for me. And I think her ability to kind of own, this is where I was lucky, but this is what I did with it. Like, I made these right decisions. That's like the crux of Survivor to me. And like, that was one of the things that really like sold me on. I mean, I was pretty sold on Dee in general, but like, I think that was a big thing for me. There's so much out of your control in Survivor, which is so frustrating. All you can control is like your relationships with people. And, some people, that has how our season really played out. Honestly, it was about loyalty and trust in these two original tribes, because Lulu got so pulled down, ended up becoming this like Bello Reba war, which is not like how I've seen a lot of new era Survivor go. So that did kind of throw me off a little bit,
Yeah. The war is coming.
So talking about that early merge moment where, you just mentioned like who was on the right side, who wasn't, that would ultimately led to one of the craziest votes of the new era, with Caleb playing his shot in the dark successfully. And then J Maya going out on the revote. Walk us through a little bit about that whole tribal council, like the plan to vote out Caleb, but then also once he successfully plays his shot in the dark, like the reaction to that, and then the scramble to vote out J Maya and do that last minute.
Yeah, so obviously being on the wrong side of the Mergatory Challenge sucks. Like, we were all just back there stressing. I had never even been vulnerable in the game up until that point. So this was my first experience with being like going to a tribal. It was only 6 of us. I was super nervous because I knew I had the amulet, and I knew that like I had sort of been thrown around as like a threat a little bit. So I was so scared. So I was definitely like a little like on my back heels there, but they came back from the mergatory thing, the feast, and they were like, it's Caleb or Jay. And Dee had even said to Jake and then to me later that she wanted Jay out. So I was like so shocked, but I was like kind of down with it because it was going to help me with the amulet. And I, under no circumstance, wanted Caleb to go. I was very against that. I think because they want, you want the shock value of the shot in the dark. Some of the campaigning to save Caleb was not shown, but there was quite a bit. And me and Emily talked about it, me and Jake, and then you saw one conversation between Kendra, Katora, and myself, where me and Katora are like, we need Caleb to stay, and we have to try to convince Kendra, and Kendra hopped on board with us. And so we were like, okay, this is what we're going to try to do. We're going to get the girls from Bello. We're going to get Jake. We're going to get, obviously, Caleb and Bruce. And, if we can get Emily, too, to vote out Jay, that's great. And possibly even Mama J and Dee are on board. We were like, great. But then as I spoke to more people, it was very clear that the vote was shifting to Caleb, which was really frustrating for me. And I tried really hard to convince people otherwise. I even told Drew, I was like, he was pitching, like putting all the votes on Caleb. And I was like, aren't we worried about the shot in the dark? And he was like, no, if we do, we'll just revote and vote out J Maya. So I think that was why it was like not the biggest scramble at actual tribal councils, because that conversation had been had. Like, if for some reason Caleb shot in the dark hits, like then Jay would just go. But I tried really hard with Katora and Emily specifically to save Caleb that day. I actually think that's where I built the most trust with Emily. And it's like why I was kind of like slighted when she blindsided me, because I was like, damn, girl, like I thought we were kind of working together. You know what I mean? Because we had built this trust over really trying to save Caleb, and she gave him like a direct heads up. I gave him a heads up. I was like, this is not looking good, buddy. Like, I'm trying really hard, but I don't know if I have the votes. When it hit, like I was like, I was fine with it. You know what I mean? I was really happy that Caleb stayed. I think he's kind of like Jake that I was saying, like he'll move forward in the game. Like he understands like everyone's trying to be on the right side of the merge vote. And we talked a little bit after he came back and he was basically like no hard feelings. And he's totally cool to move forward with, me, Katora, Kendra, and Emily, like the people who gave him a little bit of a heads up, who did try to like save him. It was really unfortunate that the next thing was this split that separated us. I mean, I think that was a really, really bad moment. Another bad shake for me. Losing Caleb at a tribal council I'm not at, because I really felt like he was such a good strategic ally and also could have helped, keep the Bello numbers a little bit stronger if that rock draw went any other way. You know what I mean? Yeah. Crazy.
So we've heard you talk on some of your exit interview and even like during this interview, like your relationships. Like, we heard you talking a little bit about Queen D, and I feel like there were a lot of relationships that we got to see. And again, we love the 90-minute episodes. I think that, again, they could give us 180-minute episodes as far as I'm concerned. But were there any relationships that we as viewers didn't really see that you had good relationships and kind of like helped you sway along the way, or just relationships that we just didn't know? Like we'd be surprised that, oh, Kellie and was cool, or they talked.
I mean, I think everyone really talks. Like we did kind of allow people, at least at the merge, there was like this concept of office hours where we'd all like be able to talk to other people sort of without like the consequence of like, why are you talking to this person? So we all like had conversations all over the place. I think definitely my biggest relationship that wasn't shown was D. I've talked about that a lot. And that played into why I left. Like Drew and Austin have both told me that the threat of that relationship becoming more strategic was very scary for them and a reason they wanted to take me out. Like basically D's other option. And you kind of see that D was like hesitant to vote me out because of that. And I think Austin and Drew did like a phenomenal job convincing her against something that might not be what she exactly wanted to do right off the bat, but it was ultimately obviously the right decision for all of them. But, I think that's my biggest one that didn't make it. But even so, it's just like we had so much time together at Lulu and Bello. Like there was a lot of like personal conversations between like me and Caleb and like Katora and Kendra and I had a lot of talks. We would talk about so much, like literally anything. We talked about food, our lives, whatever. And so all those relationships, like you kind of see them, but like the depth, I think, is hard to truly understand. Even like Bruce like shared a lot of personal things with me in private. Katora shared some things with me in private. Like we had all these like really nice moments that are a really special part of the experience for me, because I love that about like obviously that helps me in the game to like make close relationships and use them. But that was also a genuine thing for me. Like I like getting close to people and I think that helped me in the game, but it was a really nice thing about the game. But also Julie, I think Julie and I would talk quite a bit. She's a tough cookie though. Like she's like someone that you can talk to for like 20 minutes and get like no information from her, but you leave the conversation being like, man, I love Julie. Like she is so good at that stuff. So I think I ended up talking with her a lot because she was Bruce's other like anointed favorite person. And so she was like, if we're going to take Bruce out, like we both got to do it or else he's going to be super mad. He's like, we have to be on the same page. So a lot of our talks were about stuff like that. But yeah, I think, D is my biggest relationship that didn't make the show.
You mentioned like she was hesitant to vote you out. The time that you got to play with D, were you able to see her as us? As the viewer saw her? Like, I feel like almost watching the season, it almost was like, maybe D can't be the winner because she is such a front runner and the editors love to play with us. When you were in the game, were you able to see that in D?
I mean, I wanted to keep D around precisely for that fact because I felt people were looking at me as like a threat. So I was like, our conversations, it's not like we were like having like, we're going to go to the end strategic conversations. I'm not going to claim that. But like what we were saying was like, it is good for both of us to be here because people are looking at us in a similar way, especially after we won the poll challenge. And so that was what we were kind of saying is like, it's like a shield threat kind of situation going on. So I definitely was like nervous about D being a potential contender. Absolutely. I mean, she had all these great relationships. She's good at challenges. But like I said before, I was on this campaign of like I wanted to play with like other threats, so I was fine with that. as well as by this point, like I had lost Brando, I had lost Caleb. Like I'm kind of on the hunt for my new like strategic like other head. Like who am I going to play with? And I know I needed numbers because I was like this Bello group is not staying together. You know, I was now targeting Bruce. Like because I was like, I can't make this work anymore. Like I can't keep them. They're never going to all vote together. So I was trying to find like, where's the crack in Reba? Where's the crack anywhere? Like, so I was looking at someone like Emily or like T to be someone I could pull over to my side to be that this new person. And so if I worked with D, I probably would have wanted to like, go to fire with her or take her out before final tribal. Absolutely. Because it was kind of clear that she was a bit of a mob boss there. But, Drew, I think, was also seen as a pretty strategic figurehead of the game. And so I think that kind of took a little bit of heat off of her. Like, that's why Dee's game is so great. Like, she had all of these various types of shields in front of her. Like, Mama J seems like the one that's like the most social, that the jury loves, like is going to get votes from that perspective. And Drew is the really intense strategy guy. Austin's like the big physical player. Like, she figured out how to, set that up. And it was pretty flawless. And the fact that her 2 number ones wouldn't vote her out is like why she won the game, honestly. So, hats off. I was trying to do that and I could not pull it off. So that was my perspective on D. And as I learned more information, as people came out to Ponderosa, getting voted out, it sort of like continued to reaffirm that, like, the decision to tell Julie to play the idol, to get Emily out, like all those types of things, like strengthened her case in my head.
I got one more question before Jack goes, because our Survivor games, I think the most that we have in common is that, we spent some time at Ponderosa. Would you guys, but I was the pre-Ponderosa, but Jatia and I, when we knew we were getting someone that night, that we would like dress up and have kind of almost like a party, like welcome it. Was that kind of the vibe that you guys, okay.
100%. Yeah, I mean, me and Caleb at the start of Ponderosa, like, it was a party. I'm not going to lie. I mean, not my vote out night. I was so sad. And Caleb stayed up with me till like 4 a.m. talking, like literally bless his heart for the rest of his life for doing that with me. But after that, we always like, there's the bar. We would have like champagne or like whatever that we knew that person liked to drink ready. They would come off the boat. We'd be cheering. We're hugging. We're crying. Like we know we had been there and we had a couple days to process. So I knew how much it made me feel good to come out to somebody like so supportive and loving. And that was absolutely the vibe every time. And I think that, everyone is entitled to feeling like upset and emotional about what was happening. And there was definitely moments of sadness and, everyone sort of making each other feel better. But we tried to make those first moments like a fun celebration of what everyone achieved like in the game, because I really think we had a really great cast of people who all played like hard in that, especially like that jury. I really feel like so many good players there. So I think we all had something to like be proud of, and we were also interested to hear like everyone's perspectives. So Caleb had this notebook and he'd be like asking everybody, and he had these power rankings he made about where everybody was in the game. And so he was like kind of like doing a low key cross-examination when people would come out, and I'd be like, Caleb, let's wait a little bit. They just cut out. But next morning we were really diving in. So, but it was definitely like a drink of choice. Here you go. Let's party it up.
I love it. Jack, when you play, because I feel like it's only a matter of time of when you play. And if you are unfortunately happen to be at Ponderosa, will your notebook make the Ponderosa trip?
Oh, man. Well, I appreciate the kind words about my potential of being at Ponderosa. I don't appreciate the slander about my notebook. Kelly, I don't know if you caught the episode where they were coming for my notebook, but
I did hear a little bit about
I actually didn't think about doing something like Caleb did, but as if I were to be a juror, I'd want to make sure to do my due diligence, especially if I were the mayor of Ponderosa like Caleb was. But I love that you asked Kelly that, because I love hearing about Ponderosa, because obviously, especially now that the Ponderosa videos are sort of obsolete, hearing about all this behind the scenes stuff that we really have no idea about is so fun. And I want to follow up actually, Kelly, and ask if there was like one specific memory you had at Ponderosa that was just like really stands out to you, that was super fun, whether it was like some sort of party you guys did or just something more introspective or chill.
I think the memory that stands out the most was there was this one night where they finally let us go on Spotify, and we had like
Oh,
my 90s, like early 2000s playlist on, and it was me,
oh,
Caleb, Kendra, and Bruce, and
oh.
we like really went hard. We had a good time, and Bruce was like bringing out all the dad dance moves and rocking out to like 90s R&B. They were
Oh,
playing
wait, now,
darts.
wait. What now, Kelly? Sing, cause Jack,
Well,
he don't know that. He doesn't
He's
know
too
that
young.
top.
He's too young.
Wait, girl, sing me
Oh,
one of some of your favorite, or
if
just
you
like
think I'm singing, you're out of your mind.
not well, but we need to test Jack's knowledge. So let me
Well,
tell.
I'm a big like I love like a boy band still. Like I love a little
Okay.
Backstreet Boys, love a little In Sync moment.
Oh,
You know
have you
what I
heard
mean?
this song, Kelly? My love. Do you ever dream
I
of
couldn't sing along, but it
candy
sounds uncanny like the
coated?
original. So,
Okay, raindrop. Okay, so
but we
Jack.
really got Bruce going, and we were having so much fun. And we stayed up super late. Like they kind of like shut us down sometimes, but we were having so much fun that they let us keep going. So that is definitely like a really fun memory. We were just like, oh, it was just like four humans having a great time. But I mean, I also really appreciate like the little moments we had. Like, so I spent so much time with Caleb and Kendra. We would like watch The Office till like 4 a.m. every day, and we were able to like talk through like all three of us like wanted to play so hard and we're so passionate about the game, and it sucks to go out earlier than you'd want, and it was really like healing for me. And I think it's hard to be late in the game, you don't have this time, honestly, where I was able to like sit there and work through with people who I really liked and trusted and understood the game, that I like had the same experience, work through that with me and kind of go through like some of the bigger emotions together, and like the loss. Everyone comes on Survivor and like thinks they're gonna do great, or I think you should think that. So hopefully you do. And there is an element of loss in like not, achieving what you want. Like I was like, I didn't get to do like this big blindside I wanted to do, like all these like what ifs and things, like they do eat at people, especially if you're competitive. And so I think I really like just appreciate everyone, but like specifically those two in the beginning, for those like moments too, like just laying by the pool, talking about it, are really healing and really nice part of it too. And the partying. Emily Flippin also can party, let me tell you.
We seen a little bit in the NOLA.
Yeah,
I
she was
said,
rocking. She was
I
doing
said,
the
okay, Emily. So this isn't really a question, but I just feel like, can we take a moment to acknowledge the king that is Brandon Donlin? Like
Oh,
I love the fact that like I peep y'all relationships. Brandon, I have his
oh
notifications are
boy.
turned on my phone, so I could always look and see when he at your house with you and Gabby. But like the king that is Brandon, like we just love him, and I love the fact that
Oh
like
my God.
outside of the game, you guys have such a great relationship. Can we just talk about the baby boy
Oh
B?
my
Like,
God. I want to give Brandon Donlin flowers every day of the week. I'm seeing him tonight. I can't wait. He is
I'm gonna send you
literally
a
like, it's so
screenshot
funny. It's
of
so
his.
funny to see like he's my best, like one of my best friends, and we never played 1 minute of the game together. But like he FaceTimed me like right when we got back, and it was just we just get along. Like he's such a good guy. He brings together our season so much. I think that's like people always talking about how close our season is. I think Brandon's like really a big reason for that, honestly. So I think Brandon, we were robbed of more Brandon. You saw how hilarious he is. Jersey bad. You know what I mean? Like that is exactly how he is in real life. And he just keeps you laughing all the time. He's the most genuine guy, so trustworthy, would trust him with my life. So I mean, I love Brandon.
This is how
Yeah.
much I love him. This is my screensaver on my phone.
Is that real, or did you just change
Oh,
that?
so he won. So it's kind of to my next question, but like one night when I was in New York with him, I was like, hold my phone. I came back and this was my screensaver, and it's been my screensaver ever since. Just don't tell LaMelo Ball though. I don't
You
want
just
LaMelo
gotta
Ball.
see baby boy, every time you open your phone.
I see him.
Yeah, boy. I love it. I love it.
Speaking of, how he's brought your season together, and I've observed firsthand how close your cast is, and heard so many fun stories, and was privileged to be able to witness some of them myself. But
Yeah, it's actually the
in the
19th cast member, low key.
in the postseason coverage, or in the postseason, I guess, social media era,
Yeah.
I've seen so many fun like flashback parties, events that you guys did together. I think you guys have hung out collectively more than really any other cast that I've seen. And I just want to ask you about like what was one of those postseason moments or parties that really stuck out to you? Whether that was like a whole weekend away together or just like a specific night or a theme like that you guys did. Like tell me just some of the things that stand out to you.
So a lot of that stuff that we've been posting is from this weekend that I organized with Brandon. He was like my right-hand man here. We call ourselves the social chairs of season 45. But we had heard about how, like, honestly, season 44 inspired us a little bit. They had a kind of like a reunion before the show aired over the summer, a couple months later. And I had heard like a lot of positive things about that, like, kind of like healing wise and being able to talk through things. And so I wanted to do that. So we, as a cast, had talked about getting together, and we organized this so where basically the entire cast all went away together up to Cape Cod, and we had it was a really great time. That's where the bird party was. That's where the dress like a survivor night thing. And we were just like, let's have some fun with it. Like we are like a younger cast, which like everyone sort of like gave us crap for on the internet, but I think that allowed us to be a little bit closer. But like Julie was there, Bruce was there. We're all vibing, and everyone, I think that trip like really helped people see everyone as other humans, not just like what's on the show and like the gameplay. So I think that was like a really healing experience, at least for me too. I got to hear like why Drew's reasonings for voting me out, so I didn't feel so like blindsided when I watched it on TV. So I think that stuff was like really helpful in that realm. But we also just had like so much fun. Like obviously we're a bunch of goofy people. We have another like really cool thing from that weekend coming that I don't want to spoil if I can get it all edited together in time. But we all went out in Provincetown, which I don't know if anyone's
not the
seen it, but
P-Town.
that is like the gay mecca of the Northeast. And it's a really
Have you ever
fun.
been to P-Town, Jack?
Nah.
Jack can come next summer with us. Hopefully we'll be running it back. But we all went out there, or most of us, and there's like a karaoke bar there. And so we all got on, like a bunch of us got on stage and sang Baby by Justin Bieber. And it was pretty hilarious. I think we pissed off most of the clientele there. Caleb laid on the ground of the stage. I think but we had J Maya, so we had one person sounding good while like me and Dee were like, I rapped the whole ludicrous part. It was a lot. But we really had it was like a really funny memory that I will always remember. But I'm really grateful for how close our cast is. And I think it's nice when you can have people realize like the game is the game. We're all here to play, and we can move on with our lives. And it is what it is. We all wanted to play hard. So.
Yeah. And play hard is what you did, Kelly. I know that from the moment I did It's a Look with Robert, like, you to me gave such a strong being, right? Knowing that you were a nurse, and I was like, you know what, she gonna kill it. And although you ultimately didn't get to the end that you wanted, you made the merge, you made the jury, and in my book, you won the $1 million, right? And I know, honestly, like, some people, play to win, some people play to make the merge. Would it feel like coming out of the game and after it's airing, seeing the Kellie stance? Because I mean, like, honestly, like, I mean, everyone loves everyone on your season, but specifically for your vote out, I mean, the Swifties could have took a CD because the Kellies, they were out and they did not play about you. Like, talk us through that feeling of seeing that love on what would be one of your hardest nights that season, because I was one of them, but they were out.
Yeah, I mean, even like I feel like I had so much hype like preseason too, like very humbling and shocking, but like it's so nice. I mean, you really can't ask for a better reception there. Obviously, I was quite nervous to watch my blindside because it's so intense, and I'm like blacked out, and like more things happened that were embarrassing than me. I like dropped my shoes while I was walking. It was like, I was like, this is going to be so embarrassing.
While they were on your feet?
I was holding my sneakers on like my bag, and they fell at one point. Like it was a lot. You know what I mean? I was really blacked out. So I was so nervous to watch my like boot episode, and then I went to that early screener in New York.
Yeah.
And I was nervous for that because I only got to see the tribal before I went out and talked. I didn't get to see the whole episode, so I didn't really have all the context. But hearing like the cheers and people like gasping as I was getting votes and like the shock and all of it all, like I always said, like if I'm gonna go out, like I want to go out with a bang. Like I want to be taken out for being a threat. Like it is. I wanted to play hard, and so if I got to the end, I had something to stand on, and it was going to be one way or the other. So if it went this way, even though it was like emotionally tumultuous, I am grateful that, you know, I had such a crazy exit. I have this stupid line I said that I don't even remember saying. But it was like really, really cool to see people, you know, so sad that I was gone. I was like, hope everyone's crying along with Kendra. That was my goal. So I feel very, you know, very grateful for that. And people wanted me to come back and stuff like that. That's so cool. I couldn't ask for, you know, a better reception there. And I'm a little surprised. I'm not going to lie. Because I walked out of the game being like, I didn't get to do this blindside. I wanted to play more. I wanted to do this. I wish I had targeted Drew. Like I have all these regrets and stuff. But then it's nice to see like people did see like the stuff that I did do well, even though not everything, even though I have regrets and things I should have done differently. You know, to lose to such a powerhouse alliance, you know, it's not the worst way to go out.
Yeah, no, you went out like a queen, and I think even that I've always had love for you. I feel like I met you prior to your season started. You know, you had the leather pants. I said, "Oh, I'm gonna like her." But I feel like the night that you got voted out was honestly, Kelly, the night that you really stole my heart. One, when you came out there and talked, like the way that you composed yourself, the way that you were able to just in that moment in front of all of those people where I feel like some people would have been like a deer in headlights. You just really commanded the room and you just talked so well. And it was just like, I think I love her. And then afterwards, I think there was a lot of commotion, right? And they were like, we were being pulled in a lot of different directions. And I remember you turning, and I think it might have been me and Brandon and Gabby. And you're like, I'd love to go hang out with some of those people. But honestly, like, I really just want to be with y'all right now who understand my experience. And so, like, you know, we drunk and I don't know. One, I think also that's the night I fell in love with Gabby. But just that moment with you, hard to explain or quantify, but I just saw you as that real person. And just like in that moment, you still radiated. And so I just want to just allow you to say thank you for having that moment with me, or just allow me to be in that, because it really was special. And although I can only imagine what your emotions were like, but that night in that little bar that we couldn't find a seat, but we worked our alliances to get seats and whatever, but like you just still just shined so bright, and it was just such an honor to be there and to watch you. So I just hope that you know that people see you.
That was so sweet. Thank you so much. But I really felt so supported. I think it was like such a nice blessing for me to have that screener. And, you know, like Dee flew in and Caleb came, a bunch of people came to support me, which was like really touching, like to have people, like the fan reaction is amazing, but it's really so special to have people like show up for me like that, yourself included, and everybody who was there and like supported me that night after. It made like a week that could have been really stressful and scary, like one of my favorites of the whole Survivor experience. So I'm super, super grateful for that. You were so, oh my God, I can't. Don't compliment me so much.
I want to throw one more strategic sort of question at you.
That's why Jack's here. I love
it. But so you mentioned a couple things, you know, after you voted out, you had these regrets. And the way I look at it, it's always like a lot of players have regrets, but it's hard to be like, because in the moment, you're obviously a strong strategic player. In the moment, you're doing the best you can with the information that you have. And so it's hard to, it's like you can look back and be like, oh, if I knew that, I could have done that. But obviously, you don't always know that stuff. But I'm wondering if during the game, was there like a specific inflection point where you really were sort of thinking about going different directions, and then you went a certain way that you wish you had gone? Like, is there, I guess, a regret that you?
I know exactly what I was saying for this. Yeah. So at the 6 split, I was immune. And, you know, definitely my priority was not letting Kendra go home. If Bruce's idol came out, I was very worried about that because Kendra was like my most loyal person here on that beach with me. But I think, you know, it was like sort of shown that I was debating a lot between Bruce and Sifu, or what I felt in my head I was debating between Drew and Sifu. And I tried to push for Drew, and no one wanted to vote him out. So I felt like, now that I look back a little bit, even in that moment, I still was like, I'd rather take out Drew, because he was, to me, like the strategic, front hold of anyone. I mean, I didn't even know how close Reba was, but he was like clearly a strategic guy. I had tried to like talk with him a little bit about like philosophy, and he like wasn't really like giving me a lot. So I was like, okay, I don't think he wants to work with me. Like, he voted out Brando. Like, there's a lot of reasons that I was like a little wary of Drew. And that's who I really wanted. But like Kendra and him had a good relationship. I think that's like big testament to Drew's game, that even though Kendra was blindsided on a vote, like she still felt like she had inroads with Drew. And I didn't know until that day really how close Emily and Drew were. So I just like was met with like pushback against voting out Drew. And I was like, I don't want to swing. If I pushed too hard, I was worried I was going to like put this huge target on my back and have all the reds coming after me. And so that's like the thing I always like think back on and be like, I had this like intuitive feeling that I wished that I went for Drew. Ultimately, I feel like my priority was to save Kendra and Bruce there, but I wish I had done that instead of Sifu. But it was just a hard day to like, it was so quick. We're at another beach. I have no relationship with Sifu. He was like kind of running around making fake idols again or napping for that day. So it was hard to strategize with him. So I ended up in this situation where I was like, I'd rather get Sifu out than Bruce. But that is what would like haunt me when I went home, was I knew that I needed to swing bigger at that moment, and I didn't do it when I was immune. And it would have been hard. I think it would have been like really hard to pull off getting enough votes there, but I wish I tried harder so that I could sit back with a little bit less of regret there. And if I was already going to be this big threat that needed to go, I may as well have thrown around my influence at that moment. So that's the thing that I have the most like retrospective regret over. But that is a little bit like, obviously now I know how powerful this Reba Alliance was and how great they were. And I didn't know all of that, but I did know that they were like working together by this point. It was becoming more obvious. So yeah.
It sounds like your instincts were right. It just, I mean, with all the connections that he had to like Kendra and Emily and even Sifu there, it might have been difficult to pull off. So
I think I think maybe like this really, I always think about this too, like because I didn't go to tribal council, I think I played Survivor at a little bit slower pace, like almost like what a 39-day game I think would feel like, where I had time to build relationships with people in a way that I felt would make them more genuine. And I think it worked for me in the beginning. And so I sort of got like into this pattern of like, okay, like I can take these moments, I can build these relationships slowly-ish, and then move forward with them. Whereas like at the merge, like things are so fast, like, and I hadn't been to tribals that much. So it was like the game was an overdrive all of a sudden, where it was like, it was every single day we had something new. Even if it wasn't immunity challenge, like we had the auction, we had like a journey, we had whatever. It was like so quick. And the time you had to strategize was so small compared to what I had been doing. I think that just like kind of set me up in a different headspace. And it's why I would love to play a 39-day game of Survivor, because I think things like your intuition and picking up on what people are, how they're acting, like comes into play more there. But that's not the game I was playing. And so I wish that I was in that like faster paced, like, okay, I have to like hit hard and heavy. Like I need to like have that strategic talk with Dee the first day. I can't wait 2 or 3 days. Like I need to be faster there. I think I kind of got lulled a little bit because of how the beginning of the game went for me. And so that's always a takeaway I've had as well.
I would say like if you were to return on like a second chances, I'm no expert, but I wouldn't switch up that
when,
much.
not if, when.
When you turn on a second chances type of season or whatever, you know, I'm not an expert, but I feel like you played a very strong game. So I wouldn't necessarily, it's easy because it didn't work out this time to be like, oh, I should do this, and that different. But I always think of Survivor as like, if you run the season 10,000 times, who's going to win the most times? And I definitely think you would be up there at the top with the game that you played. So of course those minor tweaks are important, but I wouldn't go out there and be like, all right, I gotta like make moves like right now. You know what I mean?
No, you know, I mean, I don't think I would either, but there's little tweaks, and I want to learn from my mistakes if I do go back. And that's why I try to like be like look back and be like, all right, like, yes, these are things that went well for me. And I'm proud of certain things I did in the game, but I didn't win. And while not everything went my way, like there are things I could have changed or done differently that I wish I did. And I can own that. I can own like that I did have a part in my own thing. Like I played with too many people. I got a little drunk on options and I was more focused on maintaining those relationships, maybe a little too much. So trying to find the balance is how you become like a great Survivor player. So hopefully I could figure it out if I ever get another chance. I would love to go back and give it another whack. Hopefully where I'm not the biggest threat, but I don't know. We'll see.
Well, your game reminded me a lot during the season of like a Jeremy Collins in San Juan del Sur, where he was a very strong player who was kind of an early favorite to win and then got taken out and then came back and obviously sort of tweaked his strategy a little bit. Yeah, so I think that could definitely be in the cards. So
they compliment it. Thank you very much. Caleb used to say I got Jeremy Collins because we're actually both 10th place, second jurors. I was like, you got Jeremy Collins at Ponderosa. So I mean, I love Jeremy. Cambodia is one of my favorite seasons. So I'm also a big Wentworth fan. So I love both of them, love their games. So thank you very much, Jack. Very nice. You guys always gas me up. I appreciate it.
Because we love you here, Kelly, and we'll be right here when that second time comes, gassing you up even more. And we don't want to take up too much of your time, but again, we appreciate the love and support that you've shown the podcast, and thank you so much for taking the time with us. But before we wrap up this interview, how would you summarize your experience as a whole? Like even like including 43, including like your pre-45 and even like your post 45 as we are gearing up for another season, because there's like, another roller coaster of emotions that you kind of experience. But so how would you just sum up all of that? What's in our Jerry Springer final thoughts?
I think overall the experience honestly is very intense. It's a very emotional, like all-consuming, and for me, because I had so much time preparing and then going, like it was a lot. That's all-consuming. I had put all this pressure on myself to do well, but I wouldn't change any. Like I'm so grateful to be able to have done this. Like I love games. I'm very competitive, and that's why I went out there, honestly. But all the other stuff I got from it, like this is all like the mumbo jumbo everybody says is true. Like I have some of like the most meaningful relationships I've ever had. Like some of my best friends, people who will be in my wedding, are from this. Like that is a really special thing. And I think it also taught me a little bit about, I am someone who likes to be in control and like be organized and have a plan. And Survivor is throwing all that out the window. There's a lot of things out of your control. And I'm still working on this, but I think it helped me like sort of reflect on like there are always going to be things out of my control that I can't fix or change, and sort of like to be a little bit more at peace with that and like letting go with certain things and like taking control over what I can and just being able to not like harp too much on the stuff that I can't. So that's how I'm trying to help Survivor help me grow as a human is trying to take that away, like take a little bit of that pressure off, have a little bit more fun. But I had a great time and I continue to have a great time. I love talking strategy and Survivor. So I hope I get to keep doing stuff like this. And thank you for having me. I love it. And I can talk about 46, talk about the traders. Like I'm into all this stuff. So I'm looking forward to staying active and having fun.
Thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, it was
absolutely.
You guys are the best.
The door over here is always open. Kelly, I'm sure we will see you sooner rather than later, but this has been your exclusive postseason with Queen Kelly.
Oh my God. Please no. Thank you guys. I love you both.
Survivor News.
Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News.
Survivor News.
Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News. Survivor News.